So welcome to this event hosted by Tibetan Action Institute and the International Tibet Network. My name's G. I'm going to be helping to host and facilitate some of the session. We're going to be exploring some inspiring ideas, I hope, which Laden is going to give us some context for. Laden, over to you.
Great, thank you. So thank you to everyone for joining us, anyone who's watching now or who'll watch later, and for all of the participants today. We're really, really thrilled to be doing this. Not thrilled about the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party, which is meant to be tomorrow, though not quite. But yes, tomorrow's the day they'll celebrate the 100th anniversary of China's Communist Party's founding. And so we thought, what better way to mark this occasion than to not to talk about all the terrible things that the Chinese Communist Party has done to all of us and our people in our nation, our peoples in our nations, Tibetans, Uyghurs, Hong Kongers, Southern Mongolians, Chinese citizens themselves. What we're going to focus on today, instead of the brutal repression of the Chinese Communist Party and the past 100 years, we're going to look forward and we're going to talk about the future. And we're just going to have an open, very fluid live brainstorm here online for where we discuss nonviolent strategies and action plans and ideas to hasten the downfall of the Chinese Communist Party, to bring about the end of this brutal regime. And this is work that we are all, we're all working for freedom and human rights as individual activists within our organizations, within our communities, and our exile populations, and our together in our solidarity work. And now is a great time to just, I think, sort of open it up and talk about the work that we're doing, but come up with new, hopefully some exciting ideas for us to work on and collaborate on in the future. And we hope this will be a really good omen for the Communist Party, a really bad omen for the future of this tyrannical regime. So I'm going to just leave it there and throw it over. Actually, I'm going to introduce a video. So one of our colleagues, brothers, cannot join us today, Tenzin Sindhu, unfortunately. But because he's on a bus on his way to a big protest. And so he is not able to join us, and he will instead join us by video. And if we can have Tenzin Sindhu, who is...
Hi friends, so we are meeting at a time when there is some attention coming from international community. It's not that suddenly they found interest in human rights situations in Tibet or East Turkestan or Southern Mongolia. No, there is no charity. It is for their own interest. That's why they are taking it up. And when it's happening, it is... So therefore, now is time to stand in unity. I propose that all of us, the Uyghur people of East Turkestan, Mongolians of Southern Mongolia, Tibetans of Tibet, people from Hong Kong, Taiwan, and most importantly, the Chinese people who truly want freedom and democracy in China, we must all stand together in unity. And I propose that we make what is called the common alliance. We are all together in this for a common purpose. And there is one enemy, the Communist Party of China, who is running this dictatorial regime from China. We have to be more organized, especially among the leaders. I know our groups in so many different countries, in Paris, in London, in New York, in Taiwan, in Japan. Many meetings have happened. But now it's time to bring a consolidated united effort, common alliance. Let us all work on this. And in this discussion, if its proposal for common alliance gets support from all the different fraternities, I'm very happy to take part in this. My name is Tenzin Sundu. I'm an activist and a writer based here in India. I've been in the Tibetan freedom movement entire my life, and I have commitment for this. Let us all stand in solidarity and in unity, move forward and fight together so that the freedom for the occupied people and democracy and freedom within China is also a possibility. So for all of us. Thank you.
Great. That was wonderful. And now I'm going to throw it over to Tsundu, or to Tandoor.
Thank you. Thanks to Sundu for the great introduction, and I think, yeah, I agree with what Larin and Sundu have said about the significance and the meaning of this particular occasion right now, because in one sense, it's no fun to see the Chinese Communist Party celebrate its 100-year birthday in some sense. But at the same time, I think if we think about the last 70 years that the CCP has been in power and what it means, it also means, issues like Tibet, East Turkestan, the Chinese democracy issue, or Hong Kong, these issues are supposed to be dead long time ago, right? The Chinese government, when the CCP came into power, its goal was to resolve all of these issues, eliminate all of these issues, crush all of these people, and basically done with that problem, right? But after 70 years of having the CCP in power and all of its violence and all of its state terrorism and all of its devastation of our land, of our culture, of our religion, language, and people, we are still here. The Uyghur people are still struggling for their freedom. The Tibetans are still struggling for their freedom. Hong Kong is still struggling for freedom and democracy, and the Chinese Democrats are still here, right? So I think it's really significant that we are finally coming together in coordination, because, as Tsundu said, it's really important for us to build a common alliance, not just in a moral sense, but on a practical level in terms of coordination. The reason why this is important is because empires all use very similar strategies, and we have seen the empires of the past. Let's look at the British Empire. One of its main colonial strategies of controlling the peripheries and defeating the peripheries was divide and rule, right? So it had to divide India from Egypt, Burma from India, and then within India, it had to divide all of these different groups across different lines. It relies on these kinds of strategies, and it's exactly the same thing that Chinese government is trying to do right now. It has somehow in the past managed to put a firewall between different groups, different peoples, and different nations in its peripheries that are struggling for liberation. And we have to make sure that finally it's no longer able to do that. And when we come together, so that we don't only have, in the past, we have had movement level mobilization, amazing movement mobilization in each of our movements. But what we now need to do is create inter-movement coordination so that we are all working in coordination with each other, and we can build this coalition that's extremely powerful. And one thing that, one question that comes up among us and among any nonviolent groups that are struggling for freedom is, does nonviolence work? does nonviolent action work? And there are many people who agree with us that it works, because we have seen it in our own experience, how it works, right? And there are people who say it doesn't work. And I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about those who argue that nonviolence doesn't work. There is one type of people who say nonviolence doesn't work. And when they say that, what they mean is they think of nonviolence as the absence of violent mobilization or the absence of armed insurrection. And that's why they say it doesn't work. But nonviolent action is not the absence of armed insurrection. It is, in fact, the presence of nonviolent strategies and tactics, right? Carefully conceived, strategically planned, nonviolent mobilization of mass movement that basically works to overthrow a regime, that works to liberate a people, that works to advance freedom and human rights. So the definition of what nonviolent resistance means is very different from what those people claim. And that's one reason. And even though we have known in our own experience, when we talk about nonviolent resistance, we are talking about civil resistance type movements, right? The Indian independence movement, where we have people relying on these multiple broad array of tactics and tools and strategies that are strategic, that are not only spontaneous and emotional, that are also strategic and dedicated to achieving particular objectives and goals. And when we talk about that type of nonviolent movement, it can be profoundly powerful. And it's not only us. You don't have to believe people on the ground, people in the trenches, people who are, we have firsthand experience of how these things work. Recently, there has also been a body of statistical evidence that support what we have been arguing all along. And I would like to point people to, one of the most significant works in this literature in recent years is the work that's been done by Erica Chenoweth and Maria Stefan. These researchers and scholars, they have analyzed more than 560 movements, campaigns, and these are campaigns for self-determination and campaigns for democracy over the course of the last 120 years. And the conclusion that they have come up with is that nonviolent resistance are twice as effective as armed insurrections. And this is, very strong evidence that support the work that we have already been doing. So in a sense, I think it should be reassuring for us that what we are doing is we are in the right industry, right? And the last thing I want to say is, another type of people who say nonviolent resistance doesn't work often think of nonviolent resistance as merely protest movements. They equate nonviolence with protest movements. And if you think about only protest movements relying purely and only on protests, then of course it's not enough. It's not sufficient. Protest is only one aspect of nonviolent resistance. When we talk about nonviolent resistance, we can be talking about more than 200 tactics of resistance that have been laid down or that have been documented by people like Gene Sharp. And more recently, other scholars like Michael Beer, they have documented over 400 new tactics, altogether many new tactics, counting to something like 400 tactics of nonviolent resistance. So these are basically the arsenal of tactics and tools and strategies that we are talking about. And when we put all of these things together, I think nonviolent resistance has immense power to move things and to move a regime, even a extremely brutal and ruthless regime like the Chinese government. So I'll leave it there. And I think, it's extremely significant that all of us are together right now because this coalition of different nations is the last thing that the Chinese government wants to see.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Laden, and thanks so much, Tandoor, as well for that. And now we're going to get a chance to see who else is here. So we've got the two of you contributing to this session, but we also have a bunch of other people. Here they are all appearing. Look at that. As if by magic from all across the world. There we go. Okay, so we're going to ask you each to introduce yourselves. We're just going to go around. There's a list which I think you'll have in advance, right? So Lard, I'm going to ask you to reintroduce yourself, and then we'll have Alison, and then we'll go down the list. So after the person before you go, just take a minute to say who you are, where you're from, a little bit of background. Lard, kick us off.
Let's try that again. I'm Hladin Tetong. I am Tibetan Canadian. I am the director of Tibet Action Institute and have been doing this work for my whole life in the movement with my parents as a child outside the Chinese embassy in Vancouver protesting, and then eventually on my own really through Students for a Free Tibet for more than a decade. As a student organizer, and then an international organizer leader from the office in New York, and now Tibet Action.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alison Reynolds. I'm here representing International Tibet Network. I have a background in environmental campaigning. I worked for Greenpeace UK in the Direct Actions Unit for a number of years. And I worked full-time in the Tibet movement for more than 20 years until very recently. And I'm still working with International Tibet Network, but I'm also running a campaign to stop a nuclear power station being built in my neighborhood.
Disle Tamalo, my name is Chimilamo, and I'm a community organizer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Zuraday Erkin. I am a Uyghur Canadian human rights defender. I've been in this movement for 2 years now, full-time. Before that, I was an activist, and I think got into activism and being a human rights defender after witnessing the Urumqi massacre in 2009 when I was back in East Turkestan for my summer holidays, where we were racially profiled at the airport, and also I saw all of the inequality and their discrimination. So I decided to be involved, and I'm currently in Munich working as the Program and Advocacy Manager at the World Youth Congress.
Hi everyone, my name's Sam Walton. I'm the CEO of Free Tibet, and I've also got a background in direct action for human rights and the peace movement.
Hi everyone, I'm Frances Hoy. I'm the director of We the Hong Kongers. I started my activism for Hong Kong freedom and democracy since I was 14, and I was a former member of Scholarism, which is a student organization in Hong Kong. So I left Hong Kong last year under the national security law, and I'm now just serving for We the Hong Kongers as the director. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Tandoor. I grew up as a Tibetan exile in India, and now actually having lived in New York, I worked with Students for Free Tibet for about 9 years, and then more recently, over the last 4 or 5 years, I've been working with Tibet Action.
Hi everyone, my name is Teng Biao. I'm a Chinese human rights lawyer and activist. I co-founded a couple of human rights organizations in China, and currently president of China Against the Death Penalty and a post-visiting scholar professor at the University of Chicago.
Brilliant. So yeah, lovely to see you all here. Nice to see some familiar faces and some new faces too. So we heard from Tandoor that there are hundreds of forms of action involved in, that constitute forms of strategic non-violent action, right? And what we're going to do now is we're going to take some time to hear from this group of contributors about some of the ideas, some of the examples, some of the inspirations, some of the kinds of action that we could take to hasten the downfall of the CCP through not strategic non-violent action. We're going to hear, the kinds of actions that we take in different kinds of situations across this very diverse network of people who are resisting, who are struggling for this cause. So the way we're going to do that is we are going to do it as a bit of a bit like a brainstorm, but rather than each person just going when they feel like it, we're going to go around this group of contributors in a circle. So in the same order that everybody introduced themselves, and each person's going to take, I don't know, maybe up to 30 seconds. I mean, if it's a really complex thing to explain, maybe take up to a minute. But the idea is to hear, you know, a lot of ideas. So try not to take too much space with it. Try to be concise, kind of a bit of a quick fire, kind of rain of ideas, of inspiring actions and examples that we have. So with that as the kind of the core question, what inspires us? What ideas do we have? What examples do we know about, that we've heard about, that we can bring forwards into this space to kind of inspire our ways forwards? I'm going to ask us to start again with Laden, and then Alison, and then so on and so forth. And when we get to the end with Teng Biao, we just come back to Laden again, and we'll just keep going. If he comes to you and you feel like, oh, nothing's kind of like coming now, just say pass, and it'll come back round to you again after a while. Okay, so Laden, kick us off. Let's see what we got.
Great. Okay. I apologize if any small children crash this party right now. I've just had one come and gone. So I really, so this is a very dark time for all of us. You know, the overarching situation for everybody, the situation on the ground right now in Hong Kong, in East Turkestan with the Uyghur genocide, for Tibetans with the blackout, for the, you know, the crackdown in China. And I just feel like the bright spot, the light in the darkness, I've said this before, for me, and I think for many of us, is our solidarity work, and is the action we take together. It really is just, I feel like we especially work so well together. People here on this program today, but also I can see this happening all over the world if you just watch social media, and our allies, activist allies, friends, brothers and sisters everywhere. So what Sindhu said, I'm just going to piggyback on Sindhu's idea, the common alliance. He just sent that video in, and you know, I know we work together formally and informally, mostly informally, with our different groups and different movements. We have throughout the years. It didn't just all start recently, but I do feel like now is this moment where it's just almost effortless to work together in a way that I haven't experienced before, or certainly on the Beijing 2022 Olympics campaign. And it's just so clear now why we need to work together. And especially watching the fall of Hong Kong recently, just like, it is heartbreaking for us to see. I have spent a lot of time in Hong Kong, and well, a lot of time. I've spent a good amount of time in Hong Kong and just loved being there and everything about that city. And we're in this sort of unimaginable place, of course, with the Uyghur genocide too. And so, common alliance, we get together. What do? What does it mean? Well, Sindhu suggested it as an idea.
Laden. Quick fire. It's like common alliance,
yeah.
Right? Common alliance. That's
okay.
the point. Cool. Alison.
Okay. Next.
Okay, well, aside from becoming Communist Party members and working our way up the ranks and smashing it from the inside, which might be, you know, long-term strategy, I think we just need to remember China is sometimes its own worst enemy. Interesting to read the Wall Street Journal this morning talking about aggressive, noisy diplomacy, really annoying other countries. Is there a way? And saying that, you know, China's trying to make its diplomats be less shouty, but nationalism gets in the way. Is there a way of driving a wedge between nationalism and the CCP? Because at the moment they're synonymous. And I just want to say to Tandoor, yes, protest is only one part of this huge array of non-violent action forms, but I think we as a movement and movements get a huge bang for our buck when we protest Chinese leaders abroad. So we absolutely need to come on doing it. And there's something else, but I'll come back to it.
I'm going to jump on Hadin and Sundula's idea about this global alliance, but I would also encourage to go beyond the communities that are currently at the forefront of the movement. I'd encourage the inclusion of the stakeholders of the BRI. To date, we have more than 60 countries that have almost 2/3 of the world's population that have signed on or have indicated an interest in doing so. So with the growing influence of CCP, the atrocities that are happening again and again to our communities, it will just continue to become more insidious, faster, cheaper, and easier, and hence it's actually to the benefit of the world to realize how much of a threat it is to global peace, stability, democracy, and also just emphasizing this thought of it's not unpatriotic to denounce injustice that is committed on our behalf. And so this idea of being patriotic is actually the act of defiance and standing for what is right, would encourage even folks, Chinese citizens or living in Canada, where July 1st also marks the colonization of the Turtle Island that I'm on, calls for this solidarity and a movement that is beyond the global alliance that we're looking at the moment.
Agreed with all of my colleagues here. Global Alliance, I think it means inclusion. Inclusion means other movements as well. I'm thinking currently of Military Alliance, for example, that includes many other frontline communities who are working to achieve democracy and human rights in their respective countries and regions. And I think we need to also see bigger. The bigger picture is BRI, which translates into neo-colonialism, which also translates into indigenous rights, land rights, environmental rights. And I think we need to have conversations about all of these issues at the same time. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think it complements each other. And I think another idea that came to my mind was an alliance that could also work towards really direct action. For example, sanction regime in many countries. We can push for Magnitsky-style sanctions. As you know, last time a coordinated action was taken by the European Union, Canada, US, and UK on Chinese officials and one Chinese entity, the Xinjiang Production Construction Corps, which is responsible for most of the forced labor schemes and other oppressive schemes in East Turkestan. I think we can work together on pushing that, and also including, for example, officials like Chen Chuangguo, who was the designer of the oppression in Tibet and in East Turkestan, and who knows what's next. So I think this is one thing that lacked from that sanction list, because he was not sanctioned. Why? Who knows? We need to be working on these issues together, and I believe that we can achieve concrete results like this. Or maybe legal actions can be taken as well. So I think that common alliance can work on issues like these beyond the protest movement. And I think the Beijing 2022 campaign serves as best example of solidarity working and campaigning, grassroots campaigning as well.
Amazing. So an idea for a direct action might be, I love the idea of, you're absolutely right. When Chinese leaders, when Chinese officials come to other countries protesting, but let's do more. Let's make this a direct action. Let's citizens arrest them. Yes, they have diplomatic immunity. No, that does not cover crimes against humanity. These people are involved in crimes against humanity. Peter Tatchell famously citizens arrested Robert Mugabe, and it put Robert Mugabe on the map as someone who is, committing crimes against humanity. And there is a number of good examples, including when citizens arrested Ahmed Asiri, who's responsible for the murder in Khashoggi. So that's another.
I really agree with all my friends talk about, especially the alliance. I think this is what we're doing right now. When we're having this kind of event, I think this is already an example that we are resisting through being together. And to me, I'm thinking also to strengthen our community's economic influence. I think now the world has relied on Chinese capitals and manufacturing heavily, and we have to find economic incentive to make the world completely boycott Chinese resources. So taking back to Hong Kong's 2019 movement, we had people who boycott all the pro-Beijing stores and just go to those shops and restaurants that are pro-democracy. That's just an example. But zooming back to the world, I think with Hong Kongers fleeing Hong Kong to the world, and with our strong alliance, I think we can find more incentive to really make the world and all the Western countries to find other spaces to invest their capital, and for example, like they can transfer all the investment and money to other East Asian countries. That's just some examples, but I think economic influence is one of the ways to really bring CCP down.
Thank you, Francis. I think one thing I would like to add to all the great ideas is just put some more emphasis on, I think Zumrate already said, boycott the Olympics 2022. I know that we have already been pushing that campaign and working on it quite hard. And especially, I think the next 6 months is going to be really critical, extremely important. And I don't think there's any reason we should back off on this particular campaign. I think the Chinese government is in an extremely vulnerable position in spite of all of its power projections and influence projections. I think it's exhausted. It has been made to exhaust itself through all of its campaigns out here as well. And I think this is a really great time to focus on the 2022 Olympics campaign and push countries, governments, corporations, all of those entities to get them to boycott the Olympics.
Hi, I think the Chinese Communist Party can be overthrown in a few weeks or a few months, but it can be very long. It can be 15 years, 20 years, or longer. So I think our strategy should be based on that's kind of the worst scenario and best scenario. And one thing I want to start is the Chinese government officials, especially the overseas CCP officials. Almost all party officials are corrupt, and many of them have assets in the United States and other Western countries, and we can use the human flash search engine to get the information of their address, their assets, their family members and connections, and then we publicize all this kind of information. So it's kind of naming and shaming and connecting to the idea of Magnitsky sanctions, but this is that the governmental level that is really powerful, but for the civil society organizations, we can get their information and publicize it. Yeah.
Am I just going again?
Yes, yeah. Indeed. We're just going round and round. Yeah.
So, Ali, sorry, I'm going to do connect the dots, and then people can jump on if they want. So connect the dots is something we have talked about forever in the Tibet world, and it connects back to the Common Alliance, the Global Alliance, everything that was said. Basically, if we could start a global awareness and action campaign, but start with the awareness stage where people could feed into, whether it's an interactive online map, or I'm not exactly sure how it would look, but feed into what it is that the Chinese government is doing, whether it's the BRI countries or not, just what the Chinese government is doing in your place that is undermining human rights, freedom, local rights, indigenous rights, you name it. And whether we hear these stories all of the time. Everywhere I go, I'm Tibetan. Oh, I meet someone from Zambia or I don't know where, and they tell me some story they have about what's happening in their country related to resource extraction and etc. And I just feel like to bring these voices together and provide a platform, a little different than the Common Alliance, but a way to connect these dots. We've talked about this for years. If we just can operationalize it, will help, I think, not just to build solidarity across the globe for those of us fighting the CCP, but also to strengthen support for and build the momentum for all of our work, whatever specific purpose it may be for, issue it may be on, kind of in the bigger picture, because people aren't even sure where all these dots, people don't even really know where all these dots meet up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it needs to be a global mapping platform. I think it doesn't even necessarily have to be evidence of China abusing human rights kind of in those places, but just to show the reach of the CCP abroad. It's not just something that, is limited to China. So, just one example here, China's investing in this nuclear power station project that I'm campaigning against. And, in the last few months, that's become politically unacceptable. And it's causing a real problem for the project. So, we can exploit it. So I think that something that needs serious resourcing, but I think it's a great idea. I'm trying to think of something that symbolizes Chinese nationalism that we could use to somehow kind of say to people in China, if you're feeling nationalistic, the CCP is not the thing that you're feeling that you should thump your chest about. It's something else, and there's something on the edge of my brain, and I haven't quite got it, but I'm still thinking about that one.
Yeah, definitely echoing some of the sentiments that was said earlier. In order to be free, one must be aware of the ways in which they're being oppressed. And I think going beyond, again, just the people that have been at the forefront of the movements, we all know that CCP is a big media black hole. However, beyond the whole insidiously stealing our lands and erasing our identities, I think once there is this action of awareness for every part of the globe where people are aware and understand the threat that CCP has to democracy and our global values, I think the job will get itself done, in the sense that CCP I see as a narcissistic person or entity that is constantly staring at its reflection in the water, and any sort of movement in that water will cause it to tremble, enrage, and act in a way that will actually benefit us and our movement.
Yes, I agree with everything that was said before me, and I just like to go back to the idea of the economic, incentives and where it hurts. I think considering something like the Palestinian BDS movement could be interesting. Boycott, divestment, and sanctions, because as we know, we're talking about currently multinationals around the world are, into Uyghur forced labor in their supply chains. So we're urging consumers to boycott these brands, or at least not buy until they really investigated their supply chains. So this can be bigger. I think with the PDS movement, the sanction regime, that could all be.
Yeah, I'm going to build on the idea of Ban Chen, because I think one of the issues about talking about China and the CCP is they're faceless. There's Z, but nobody knows anyone else. And I think, when we look at other struggles for freedom, South Africa has to come up. And there what they did is they had a very good face, Nelson Mandela. And what they did is they were able to tell human stories about what happened. And Chen is such a perfect baddie. Like, he's just so evil, and he's been so evil in so many places for so long. And if Chen is banned because he's in the Politburo, that's it. It can't be done. You do that, you burn all your bridges with China. It's done. So I think and we can see the power of baddies in American politics, where Saddam Hussein, Bin Laden, they help you tell a story. Chen isn't that important, But one of the things we're failing to do with China is tell the story. And that's why I think Chengquango is such a beautiful target for our movements together to try and, because you can't argue in any way he's savable. He's just, you know, like he's a top tier baddie.
I want to go back to Jamie's idea. I think, you know, raising awareness about, you know, what CCP is doing in all these places and wherever they are is very important. Like right now, the media is, you know, they're listening to our stories, and we have to utilize the time and their platform to tell the world what is happening in these places, and also, you know, let people know that their influence bypasses borders. It's not just within, you know, their where they rule over, but also in the US and everywhere in this world. And also, I think it's also important to combat their influence, you know, you know, in just overseas area. I know that, you know, a few months ago, the Tufts University shut down the Confucius Institute, but we know that's not the end, because the Confucius Institute is just a form for them to teach, you know, to infiltrate in the U.S., but they have different form to go into, you know, the academia and also educating Americans in the name of educating them Chinese culture and to infiltrate, you know, U.S. culture and to bring in the wrong values to our world. And so I think the you know, our battle has not yet, you know, done. It's way more than that. And even with the shutdown of the CI, we have to continue to, you know, combat their influence, not just in universities, but also in other platforms, you know, media influence and also economic influence, you know, academia influence. A lot of the places, they have their people there. So
I wanted to add something very simple, a small kind of, you know, I think sometimes we call it small acts of resistance, especially for people living under the Chinese government, whether they're in Tibet or elsewhere. One really interesting action that I have heard about is actually a Uyghur innovation related to time zone. So I heard a story where, you know, a journalist goes to Kashgar, I think it was Kashgar, and they arrived there quite late, and they're really worried. You know, they check into the hotel and they're really worried because now it's 11 p.m. Now all the restaurants are closed. They can't really go and eat dinner anywhere, you know. But then the receptionist tells them, oh, no, don't worry. There is a particular part of town where you can go, and it's actually only 9 p.m. It's not 11, you know, because the time zone tyranny is one of the ways in which Beijing controls all of those territories that are extremely far-flung. The distance between Beijing and places like Kashgar or Lhasa is like the distance between Eastern Europe and Western Europe. Distance between, you know, like these places should be 3 hours apart, 3 or 4 hours apart. And I could really imagine a scenario where, you know, more Tibetans actually start practicing this kind of time zone, you know, like running on your own time zone, Tibetan time zone or Uyghur time zone. And it's a small thing that each individual can do, change the clocks in your own home or on your own wristwatch. But it could be a start. It's a beginning. It's a gateway to stepping outside Beijing time zone, stepping outside the Chinese government's tyranny. And it's a small step that can actually open up to bigger symbolic and practical things.
I second with idea many of you have raised that tell the stories. You know, the Chinese Communist Party is based on violence and lies, and we can make effort to counter the Communist Party's propaganda, and we already have a lot of media coverage, the art pieces and documentaries, and I'm thinking if we can do something like a commercial movie that not a small video, but a really famous, influential movie. It can be fictional or based on some true stories, and then yeah, that would be useful. Yeah.
Okay, so I've been conferring with the producers in the back room as to whether we carry this on because of timing, and it seems like there is interest in carrying on, but also the concern that we don't run this forever. So we're going to do one more round of this. So Larden, you're going to go first. We're going to do one more round, but this time literally it's like 3 sentences, right? What's kind of right at the forefront of your kind of mind in terms of ideas, inspirations? Don't unpack it, just the headlines. So last round, Larden.
Let's go after Chinese leaders, not just the top tier, but the middle tier and the bottom tier who are in our backyards, who are at the embassies and the consulates. I think of the suffrage, the movement for women's suffrage, and how one of these old black and white images of women in the UK, I think, chasing a particular leader who was a member of parliament who was not with them, and just following him everywhere he went. Could we not do that? Could we not set up teams and squads and pods to do the same?
Yes. Next.
Love the time zone idea, and that's just a way of establishing the separateness of all these places under China's rule. I think come back to how we engage with students. I think it's a really difficult one, but these are very much China's future leaders, so got to think about that one a bit more carefully. Also love Chen, the idea of targeting Chen. So.
Agree. All of them, all of the 3 points. In addition to that, I would just say, while targeting them, also investing in our own youth and leadership and training, and also the awareness campaign comes from also the knowledge that is built within our own movements about other movements that need to be in solidarity with. So.
Absolutely. Capacity building for our own youth, because they're the next generation. They're going to take this from us. I think being strategic about, like economic sanctions and all that, targeting the leaders, and boycotting Beijing 2022, any major sporting event happening in China, we need to campaign against it together.
The Olympics, it has so many juicy targets, and they're not all in China. If we're going to have an alliance, let's launch it on the roof or something.
Agree with all of that, and I will always be down for any kind of events like this with my allies and friends. I think being here in this event, I learned a lot, and we have to do more of this to brainstorm and just to share ideas. And I think this is just one of the way for us to gather our thoughts and our power to go against the CCP. So.
We have all heard a lot about China's 50-cent army, but I've also noticed a lot of Chinese government official accounts are actually on Twitter, and they do a great deal of propaganda on Twitter. And I think we should spend some time and effort into trolling them.
Yeah, 3 sentences, 3 points. First, we can persuade all democratic governments to pass the legislation like a Magnitsky Act. And second, we can lobby the democratic countries to pass laws prohibiting the Western tech companies from exporting technologies, especially surveillance and censorship technologies to China. And third, we can promote some important distance to get human rights awards, like Liu Xiaobo getting the Nobel Peace Prize, and many others, like Ilham Tohti, Xu Ziyong, like that. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much for those ideas and contributions. And we're going to do another round though now, right? But we're going to do it differently. Rather than coming with more ideas, what we want is a round where you get a chance to say a little bit now, just briefly again, a minute, saying like, how are you feeling now, having heard all these ideas? How you feel going forwards with this kind of like, all these sort of creative opportunities, inspirations, kind of in your backpack, as it were, heading into the future here. So how are we feeling now, having heard all of that, going forwards? And again, Laden, kick us off, please.
Yeah, I feel great. I think we do this a lot in the Tibetan world, and with our Tibet network, global Tibet groups, and doing it with you all just makes me realize we need to do this on a big scale, regularly, quarterly, at least twice a year. And I'm committed to making that happen somehow, whether it's online for now and in person later. And as broad a group as possible, but maybe starting with the core Uyghur, Tibetan, Southern Mongolians, Hong Kongers, our core 6 or 7 groups and the peoples, and then moving out. So I think this was just the right thing to do on the eve of this terrible anniversary. So thanks.
Thank you.
I mean, my overwhelming feeling in many respects is just how much I miss working with you guys all on a full-time basis. But I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I think, yeah. I mean, I think we've never lacked opportunities in the Tibet movement or any of the other movements. China presents us with opportunities all the time, and I just think being really smart about choosing our tactics and our strategies really carefully, and just remembering that tactics are not everything. Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So, let's just be really smart going forward.
Today's session for me was a testament that that divide and rule colonial strategy is not going to work this time. I'm committed to this coalition by addressing and implementing the truth and reconciliation calls to action of the place that I currently reside, whilst investing in our youth and educating myself to become a better advocate. And after what was all said today, the oppressors, you best be scared, because we're coming for you.
Absolutely. We're ready. I feel inspired. I feel overwhelmed with, I think in a period where, we're experiencing the Uyghur genocide, and, I have personal, I live the consequences of my actions, because the Chinese government targets my family. So in that kind of dark time, finding solidarity between our movements and coming together to work towards the common goal, I think there's nothing more beautiful than this, and I feel more motivated than ever to work alongside all of you.
I'm really excited to work alongside other groups. I think when we talk about building an alliance, alliances are built by generosity. You don't expect people to come to you. You have to go to them. And I think as the Tibetan groups, we are more established. We have more systems, more resources, more experience. We have perhaps less energy and less creativity than other groups. I don't know. We've all got different strengths, but I think as the Tibetan groups, we need to be prepared, or the groups coming from the Tibet movement, we need to be prepared to give more. On a kind of perhaps slightly socialist basis, we've maybe got a bit more. And so we need to go out there and build these alliances and be prepared to be generous as much as possible and turn up at other people's events, etc. And what I just say is Free Tibet, we absolutely throw our doors open, and we're willing to work. If we've got something that can help you, give us a call. We want to help. We want to do this stuff together.
I am empowered and inspired by all my friends here, and I'm just taking your brain and trying to think of other ideas that we can do in the future. And I think, Hong Kongers are late to the game, but we're here and we're all joining you guys. And hopefully in the future, we can continue this and do more of this.
No? We can't hear you at the moment, Tandoor, no.
If you take out your headphones, Tandoor.
Oh, we can hear you.
Well, let's hear from Teng and see Teng Xiao, and then we'll come back to you in a moment, Tandoor, while you see if you can work that.
Okay. Okay. So I think the solidarity is very important, so Chinese people, more and more Chinese people will realize the importance of liberal democracy, and they will become more and more maybe angry at the brutal Communist Party regime, and the civil societies, as we are in. Play a very important role in influencing the Western policies on China. So it's the governments, the democratic governments have more strength, have more resources, and our work can impact the policy, and everyone knows, and everyone can feel that the international environment is changing. The wind is changing. Confronting China, not appeasing China, is kind of a consensus. So, the free countries. So we should be kind of optimistic and continue our work.
Great, thank you. So it looks like we may not hear from Tandoor at the end here. We'll see if he pops back in, then obviously we'll give him a chance. But what we're going to do now is hear from Kemi to kind of take a bit of time to wrap this up for us. So Kemi, over to you.
Thanks. What an honor to be able to have shared space with you all today. Today, for the ones that are listening, was a reminder that human rights and freedom isn't a topic of debate. It's a reality, a just world that we must all work towards and strive for by combating all sorts of injustices. And with this, what happened today, this powerful inter-movement coordination, and through strategic nonviolence that actually works. Because as James Baldwin says, those who say it can't be done are usually the ones that are interrupted by the ones doing it. And what better way to share this auspicious moment with you all than to be plotting the downfall of the CCP. And I want to leave you with these words of Assata Shakur. I quote, "It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains." Thank you. And I look forward to our next meeting.
Yeah, thank you all so much. I mean, there are so many invitations there for everybody anyone out there sort of watching this, there's invitations there. There's people reaching out saying, let's work together, let's do this, let's make this happen. So thank you all for joining us. And Tandoor, does your mic work?
I hope it works now, but it's
very short. How are you feeling now after that yourself?
I'll just say I feel very optimistic about this common airlines, because I think one thing people always notice or remind us is the asymmetric balance of power between us and the Chinese government when each of us are fighting alone and individually. But once we put our resources and the creativity in the same pot, I don't think the power imbalance is all that asymmetric anymore.
Great. Okay, so that's us done. That's goodbye then, eh? That's goodbye for now.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Mandy.
Great to talk.
Phil.